Wix Studio, the platform for agencies and enterprises to manage clients and projects with max efficiency, sharing Wix's SEO tech to help you drive growth.
Fix errors, waste, and issues in a couple of clicks. Get alerted whenever you're off track. Sign up at trueclicks.com.
Hi everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I know that we're the last thing between the break, so let's get a move on. Cameron and I are here today to talk to you all about mastering SEO scaling with a headless content management system. Now, I know that we're in the e-commerce track, so maybe just also a quick show of hands. Who knows what we're talking about when we talk about headless CMS? Good 50%. Okay, cool. I will go into a very brief description later on in the talk, but just for those that don't know. But yeah, let's get a move on. So basically what I wanted to start off with is I've got a couple of points of data that I wanted to throw at you. Then I'll pass it over to Cameron to talk a bit more about SEO as well. But what I wanted to get into is what we at Storyblok have defined as kind of the bigger problem. And some of these statistics that I wanted to call out are very much that, the average internet user worldwide spends about 6 hours and 54 minutes per day online. An American adult actually spends an average of 11 hours per day consuming various types of media. And the average internet user sees around 50 to 400 ads per day across various digital platforms, including social media, search engines, and emails. Now, I'm sure that if I ask around in the room what a lot of people will think that we need in order to succeed, a lot of you will say, well, we need, the right technology in place. And actually my last sort of statistic that I wanted to get into talks about that a little bit, because 61% of marketers that we had interviewed have mentioned that they feel like their organization either hasn't acquired the right technology in order to solve some of these issues, or that they're not being used to their full potential. But actually, what is it that I feel like is the wider problem? That's very much that, as we're all here, and I'm sure that a lot of you also feel this, there's just an incredible amount of content that people are facing on a daily basis. We as consumers have this incredible onslaught of ads and content that we're facing every single day. And that's something where we at Storyblok also come into play, because as we have a content management system, a lot of the kind of thought process that goes into the solution that we provide for people is how can we make you and how can we make our customers stand out? How can we help business users that are ultimately having to stand out or having to have their content stand out from their competition? How can we provide them with the right tool in order to do that a little bit better? And that's something that Cameron will be talking about a little bit more. But before we kind of go into that, I just wanted to quickly, as promised, dive a little bit into what is this headless architecture. So headless architecture essentially is that you've got one central repository where you have all of your content, and then that is being casted to all of the various different channels where you want to interact with your customers. So the benefit of that very much is that if you have made one update to your content in that central repository, that will be updated on all of those different channels at the same time, as opposed to what you can see on the left, which is more of a monolithic system where you have to literally, for every single channel, you have to go in and make that update. And so that requires a lot of work. And there's a couple of other benefits that I could go into around, why a headless architecture is an improvement on a monolithic architecture. But I think that that's kind of sort of the most important point that I wanted to highlight. And that's very important because that's ultimately what allows a business to scale its content. If they can spend all that time to, really optimize the content as opposed to going into various channels and editing the same content, they can invest all of that time into ultimately scaling the content that they're putting out.
Cool, thank you. So what do we really mean by scaling? So in SEO, when we're talking about scaling, we're thinking about the opportunity to grow your website through organic presence by identifying patterns and regular issues that you can then solve on a mass scale. So we're really thinking about actually how do a few things can really hit multiple pages at once. And I hear what you're saying, great, so what do we do? How do we do this? So the basic answer is SEO, it depends. However, there are 4 things that you can really think about for you, particularly with your business and your website, to scale your SEO efforts. Well, first of all is looking at your ROI. What are those tasks or those things that take a long time but you get little gain from them? From an SEO point of view, that can be things like writing URLs. If you've got a huge site, like an e-com site, you're having to manually write URLs, that takes a long time, but actually the SEO gain from doing stuff like that really isn't very high. And that moves on to creating efficiencies. So what are the things that you're doing regularly that you think you could do on a larger scale, that you could do much faster? And those are the things that you can then start to look at, actually, how can I do this better? How can I create that efficiency? The technical difficult solutions. So if, like me, you work with clients or with your site where there are lots of people touching, editing pages at any one time, often you find that some of them aren't even SEO people, and they'll be changing the site and potentially negatively impacting your SEO efforts. So what are some of those technical things that you can do that will actually build from the ground up and can scale your SEO? And lastly, what are those common problems? For me, canonicals are always a pain in the arse. There's always someone that comes in and changes them, and it has negative impact on our SEO. So how do we actually protect that, make sure that that works? And through things like a headless CMS, we can build that from the ground up. So for me, just diving into this a little bit more, these are some of the things that we've found that have been really successful in terms of scaling our SEO efforts. So having a consistent site architecture, and I'll dig into these in a little bit more detail in a moment, but having a consistent architecture not only helps your users find your content, but can also help search engines crawl your content and find those pages. Making sure that you've got a good technical setup so they are crawlable. The amount of times I've seen people launch pages with a no index tag and then wonder why they're not ranking well in Google I can't even go into the numbers. And then also having a harmonious page UX, so making sure that actually from page to page you've got that same feel, that same look. It's used in the same way, can really help scale your efforts. And then lastly, automation. I'm sure Gen AI automation is going to be the buzzword over the next couple of days. I will touch on that slightly towards the end. So having an unclear site architecture can result in poor SEO results. So what we're talking about here is actually when someone lands on your homepage, how are they navigating around your site? That knowing how your users interact and navigate around your site can also help increase your SEO and how Google understands those things. So some of the core elements for that is a unified global navigation. So whether you're working on a multi-language site or even just within your own e-com site in one market, actually having one navigation is really clear across all of those different sections can really help boost how your site is understood. And then using your URLs to match that global navigation. Having that unified look, feel, and how it's navigated around the site can really help them boost your SEO, because it then becomes much clearer, not only for your user, but also for search engines. And then lastly, language locale folders rather than subdomains. Subdomains can often be seen as separate domains completely. And this is where actually a headless CMS can really help bring everything into that one place, because you've got it all there and you're in a folder structure, which makes it so much clearer. So here, just using an example with Storyblok, having a solid technical foundation can be really important in terms of allowing you to scale any of your SEO efforts. So with stuff like this, you can create templates. So it might be a product template, it might be a category template, it might be an article template. But then whoever's making those pages, whether they've got SEO knowledge or not, they've already got a really great, solid foundation from an SEO point of view that they can just pick up, use, and start to add their content in. But on top of that, you can also create like a modular base or blocks in this case, where you can create those things that are great for SEO. We know that they have really good user engagement. People can drag and drop and make their own pages. That's another solution that can actually work really, really well because you've created something that actually has got a really good SEO foundation. But when you're doing this, don't forget about your user engagement metrics. We know that user engagement does have an impact on your SEO. If people are coming to your site, bouncing off, not spending much time on there, Google will be seeing that and you will be negatively impacting your SEO. So don't forget about these things when you're creating those templates or you're discussing with your developers what those templates look like. And one great tool is Core Web Vitals. Now, we know that Core Web Vitals hasn't had the impact that we kind of expected it to when it was first announced, but actually it's still a really great tool to help us understand our users and how they're interacting with our site and where they're possibly getting a poor experience. But that's not just limited to Core Web Vitals. You've also got other tools like Content Square and other heat mapping things. Do pay attention to those. They can really help you understand where people are leaving your site, where they're getting their information. There might be a particular module that people really click on and it drives through to those conversions. But if that's really low on your page, do you want to bring that up? All these kind of tools can really help you understand and can really start to build those user engagement metrics. And lastly, automation. For me, automation is a great tool. It's not necessarily a solution just yet, but it is definitely a great tool. So I've got a couple of examples that we use at iCrossing. So we've created a meta description discrepancy check, which you can put in a bulk load of pages, understand, mapped against your keywords. You can start to understand where some of those issues are. It goes beyond the sort of just crawling it and then manually reviewing those. But there's some really great stuff that we've got out of that, and actually it means we can have a wider impact across those things, across multiple pages much faster. And then we've also got a schema markup builder. So I'm sure if you were working on product pages, schema is really important in terms of getting some of those extra things in search results. Here, what we can do is we built this tool that allows us to push that out across multiple pages with a real simple inserting your information. It will create that, and then you can start to use that. And that's where you can start to put that at template level and just bringing that back to how we create a page from the start.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, and then I kind of just want to close the circle around this and talk a little bit more about also ultimately what it is about headless that can really make the difference for SEO. Some of the advantages of headless in general, outside of talking about SEO now, are just that you usually, you have faster performance, you have better security, you've got a very scalable infrastructure, and you've got very flexible content structures. And all of these sorts of things ultimately are what contributes to you having a sort of natural boost to your SEO performances. And as you can see also, we work together with a bunch of different businesses there. But what is it that I really want to highlight ultimately why SEO can make such a difference, why headless can make such a difference for SEO? On a faster loading speed side, basically, what you have is that because pages will load faster, that will also be a major ranking factor for search engines. And so that's something to definitely take into account because it also really improves the user experiences. When it comes to clean code and flexibility, basically because headless separates that content from the presentation, as I mentioned earlier, it really allows the developers to use really SEO-friendly code in order to build their websites, and instead of the limitations that come maybe with traditional content management systems. Then on a structured data markup side, basically it gives you a headless content management system gives you a lot more possibility and a lot more control over adding those structured data markups, which can really help those search engines understand the content that is on your website, and as a result, possibly lead to richer results and a higher ranking. On an omni-channel delivery side, essentially, as I mentioned earlier, you will have harmonious content across all of those different channels. So as opposed to having to go into all of those different channels and updating the content in each of those channels, you'll have that all in one central content repository. And what that essentially means is that content will just be more consistent across all of those different channels, because you won't have different teams working on different channels, updating the content. You'll have all that in one place. And what that will mean, consistent content will also ultimately result in much more, in much better user experiences, and as a result also better search ranking signals, as they might spend more time on your website. And then lastly, on a scalability and future-proofing side, so headless architecture, by virtue of a lot of the things that I have described, is much more scalable. And so that you can integrate a wide array of technologies with a headless architecture. And that can essentially mean that your SEO efforts are just free to scale and are not going to be limited in the same way that they will be with a sort of traditional content management system. So yeah, thank you very, very much for coming to this talk as well.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.
Demand Sphere. Limitless visual insights from the SERPs. Unlimited dashboards and users. Easy to use and easy to scale your growth to new levels.